Hello. Today we're going to discover that evil fruit cannot come from a good tree, and good fruit cannot come from a corrupt or evil tree. What were the results of the foundation that Brigham Young laid? What has been the fruit of his teachings over time? How has his teachings affected the world? Can a rotten tree produce good fruit? Is the good fruit that has come from the LDS religion a product of the teachings of Brigham Young? Or are they strictly the result of the teachings of Joseph Smith and the Book of Mormon? Can we discern the difference between Brigham's teachings and Joseph Smith's teachings? We know that Brigham rewrote the history of the church after the death of Joseph Smith. I have linked some videos below that you can reference and look up for yourselves. I hope you enjoy it.
The church, however, has abandoned the practice of polygamy, though it still teaches that plural marriage is a principle that will be practiced in heaven. Mainstream Mormons do not consider the fundamentalists to be true Mormons because of their polygamous lifestyle. Likewise, the fundamentalist Mormons consider the mainstream LDS Church to be illegitimate, precisely because it abandoned the practice of plural marriage, a practice which had been established as an eternal principle and a requirement for all who would become gods in the celestial kingdom. The secretive lifestyle of Mormon fundamentalists makes it difficult to obtain a precise count of how many there are. Most estimates range from 50 to 100,000 fundamentalists in North America.
Polygamy is widespread and becoming more so across our country. There are
Just so we know, that 132 is disputed, obviously. It's very heavy-handed. It's very abusive to women. It threatens to destroy them. Look at verse 64. You have to believe. It commands the women to believe and to have sex with the husband. Where in the scriptures does God demand the obedience of women in that way? Nowhere. If you just try that with your wife today, tell her that if you don't believe the doctrine that I teach you and also have sex with me, Jesus will destroy you. Probably not going to work out too well for you, but that's the sick cult-like beliefs that are taught to modern mainstream LDS people today, and you really literally have to be brainwashed from birth to believe this type of false doctrine.
polygamists everywhere, not just in groups, but that have struck out on their own and could be your next door neighbor, and you wouldn't know it. I believe that there's polygamy in probably every state in the nation.
Many Mormon polygamists are not affiliated with any organized group. These are known as independent fundamentalists. However, there are many organized groups of Mormon fundamentalists. One of the largest and most notorious of these is the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or FLDS as it's commonly known. They occupy enclaves throughout many regions in North America. Their current leader is a man named Warren Jeffs, whom they consider to be a living prophet. For several years, Jeffs was on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. He was finally caught and arrested in 2006. Warren Jeffs is currently serving a lifetime prison sentence in Texas for crimes related to polygamy, which include the forcible marriage of underage girls. Nevertheless, he continues to rule with an iron fist from his prison cell, and his followers still consider him to be God's only mouthpiece on earth.
If you wanted to see what original Mormonism is, look at Warren Jeffs.
In the aftermath,
Just remember that 132, as we talked about, has specific doctrines that demand that the women believe, have sex. They make up false doctrine. If you look at verse 65, there's no such thing as a law of Sarah, and God didn't command Abraham to take Hagar to wife. Look at Genesis verses 1 through 5. Sarai even claims her wrong in giving Hagar to Abram. That's verse 5, I believe. So check it out, and you can see that it's based on many false doctrine. It contradicts Jacob, chapter 2 in the Book of Mormon. It's a total mess in many ways.
of Smith's death, there was a power struggle over who was the rightful leader of the church. The biggest dividing line was over the issue of polygamy. The leaders who rejected polygamy stayed behind in Illinois, together with their followers and Joseph's widow, Emma. Brigham Young and the other polygamist leaders led their followers west to the Utah Territory. This monument marks where their journey ended in the Salt Lake Valley. It depicts 3 early LDS leaders, each of whom were polygamists. Among them, these men had more than 100 wives. In fact, the top 15 leaders of the Mormon Church at that time were polygamists. Many of their sermons and declarations are recorded in a set of volumes known as the Journal of Discourses. Included in their sermons are statements that affirm teaching about the absolute necessity of polygamy.
The only men who become gods, even sons of God, are those who enter into polygamy. Now, if any of you will deny the plurality of wives and continue to do so, I promise that you will be damned.
All right, so now we have the modern LDS Church just saying this is just Brigham's ramblings, this is his false teachings, it's completely fine, it was never doctrine. It's so contradictory and false that they claim that he didn't mean it, or it was just him, being an old man and senile, or, the justifications are just as insane as the doctrine.
Brigham Young.
And Brigham Young was notorious for this. When they got to Salt Lake, they would go to the men and say, "It's your right, it's your duty, you need to live it." They'd pressure the man to live polygamy. It was rampant in Salt Lake.
This doctrine of plural marriage is one of the most important doctrines ever revealed to man in any age of the world. Without it, we never could be exalted to associate with and become gods. Apostle Joseph F. Smith.
The principle of plurality of wives never will be done away with. You might as well deny Mormonism and turn away from it as to oppose the plurality of wives. Apostle Heber C. Kimball.
It was called the New and Everlasting Covenant. And what does everlasting mean? That it should be lived forever.
God the Father had a plurality of wives. Apostle Orson Pratt.
It was openly taught that God and Jesus both were polygamous, not just married, but polygamous.
Although the Mormon Church had been secretly practicing polygamy for a number of years, they finally went public about the practice in 1852. This drew the attention of the federal government, which began to crack down on polygamy. Nevertheless, the Mormon Church continued to defy federal demands to cease the practice. They even removed from their scriptures the troublesome passage that condemned polygamy and inserted Joseph Smith's revelation that required polygamy.
All right, let's look at this for a second. The original D&C 101 on marriage. All legal contracts of marriage made before a person is baptized into this church should be held sacred and fulfilled, inasmuch as this church of Christ has been reproached with the crime of fornication and polygamy. We declare that we believe that one man should have one wife and one woman, but one husband, except in case of death, where either is at liberty to marry again. This is the original doctrine that was in the Book of Commandments and replaced with the 132. False revelation from Brigham and his cohorts claimed that it was from Joseph Smith. Obviously, if you look at the history and you go into watch the other videos that I've made, you'll see that the actual history supports that Brigham was the originator of this revelation, and Joseph Smith never taught anything that supported polygamy. Just take a look at those videos if you haven't already done so.
LDS Church's abandonment of polygamy is what gave rise to Mormon fundamentalism, which continues to thrive today. Yet, Section 132 still remains a part of both fundamentalist and mainstream LDS scriptures, which means that once again there is a disparity between the mainstream Mormon Church's written doctrine and their actual practice. This puts modern-day Mormons in an awkward position. On one hand, they're taught to revere their early polygamous leaders, yet on the other, they're deeply offended by the polygamy of today's Mormon fundamentalists. The first 7 LDS prophets were polygamists. All of them were breaking the law. Many were in hiding, and some were even arrested, all for their practice of polygamy. So what happens when we compare the early Mormon leadership with a modern polygamous leader like Warren Jeffs? After all, he is a polygamist. He has spent time in hiding, and he has been arrested for breaking the same laws as those early Mormon leaders. Now, contrast this with the lifestyle of the current leaders of the LDS Church, who are law-abiding monogamists. It begs the question, who best represents original Mormonism? The current LDS leadership or polygamist leaders like Warren Jeffs?
It's extremely hypocritical for somebody to rant and rave about Warren Jeffs when they're Mormon. because Brigham Young did the same things to a worse degree.
Remember, no police force, no agencies to report on what went on during Brigham's time. We don't know. You think that other people are going to report Brigham Young? In a coming soon video, we're going to do what actually happened when Brigham took over, how that he changed the role of the apostles and how that he used mafia-style tactics to intimidate those who were challenging him to take over the church. Stay tuned for that.
Warren Jeffs is not alone. There are dozens of polygamist leaders and so-called prophets presiding over thousands of fundamentalist families who believe the mainline LDS Church compromised and lost their authority when they gave up the practice of polygamy.
I believed as a mainstream Mormon that God the Father was a polygamist, that Jesus Christ was a polygamist.
We were taught that God the Father is the husband of many wives in heaven. And we were spirit children in heaven, and we were sent to earth to get a body.
Giving physical bodies to spirit babies was my calling.
The idea of becoming a god was intoxicating. It was a power trip.
And we all understood that man's hope was to someday go on to godhood to run his own world.
The rationale for polygamy in the whole Mormon scheme is that's the way it's lived in heaven in the first place.
The concept of polygamy came from a doctrinal idea that man is going to progress to godhood and someday he's going to go off to procreate all the spirits of the children that'll go to his world.
Our husband would become a god. We would be called goddesses.
I could become a goddess if I did everything just right.
We would be wombs for him to use to populate his own worlds.
The polygamy thing and the Godhead thing go hand in hand. It isn't possible for one God with one goddess wife to make all those spirit babies that come down and live on earth.
So this is where polygamy solves the situation. If a man/God has 1,000 wives, he can certainly populate his new world faster.
And so these people who are now down here on the earth and working out their salvation to become gods are going to have multiple wives to populate their world that they make.
In the mind of a mainstream Mormon, there is the belief that polygamy is the order of heaven, that it will be practiced in eternity.
Back in the mainline Mormon church, I was teaching a gospel doctrine class that one day they would definitely have to live polygamy. And the wife of one of the members of the bishopric came over and sat on my couch and shed bitter tears over the fact that she knew she could not share her husband with anybody else. She was so madly in love with her husband. And I mean, she suffered over this.
You can still see the doctrine of polygamy practiced in the work for the dead, where a man can be sealed to multiple wives, whereas a woman can only be sealed to one.
Of course, this is true. We know that Russell Nelson has been sealed to his previous wife and now has another wife after she passed away. So, it's not like this isn't true. If they didn't believe in polygamy, why would they continue this false practice, which really endorses all the abuse and horrific experiences of women and children they're still going through today in polygamous relationships?
Doctrine and Covenants, Section 132, was used heavily. It was taught to us constantly. It was shoved down our throats. In fact, they use it in DNC with...
Here it is, folks. Again, verily, verily, I say unto you, if any man have a wife who holds the keys of this power. Now he's talking about the power of the priesthood. And he says, if any man have a wife who holds the keys of this power, and he teaches unto her the law of my priesthood, as pertaining to these things, as pertaining to plural wives, to polygamy, then shall she believe, and not only believe, and administer unto him, or she shall be destroyed, saith the Lord your God, for I will destroy her. So he's got to repeat that he's going to destroy her twice. For I will magnify my name upon all those who receive and abide in my law. And then he says, hey, this is about men. They get the woman, she has to believe, she's got to have sex with them, Warren Jeffs couldn't have a greater advocate than Brigham Young's false 132 revelation. There's no more satanic doctrine that has destroyed the lives of more women and children than this filth that he calls a doctrine from Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ is the perfect example of how to treat your wife. Now go ahead and read this verse and tell me if that is the Jesus Christ that you know.
Emma threatening her with hell and damnation, that she would be destroyed if she didn't live plural marriage, was exactly the same way.
This fake Jesus is ruthless with Emma, who in previous revelations that actually came from Joseph Smith called her an elect lady. 54, and I command mine handmaid Emma Smith to abide and cleave unto my servant Joseph and to none else. But if she will not, basically saying that she wasn't cleaving under Joseph, to someone else perhaps, suggesting impropriety. But if she will not abide this commandment, she shall be destroyed, saith the Lord, for I am the Lord thy God. Wow. So he's got to threaten her after he suggests that she's maybe going behind Joseph's back with other men, and will destroy her if she abide not in my law. Again, destroyed. How many destroyed in one verse do you need? This is supposed to be Jesus? Okay, if you want to believe that.
That they do that and teach the children as they grow up in the Kingston group that they will be destroyed, and they use the fear and the guilt that we need to live plural marriage or else we'll be destroyed.
My wedding day was bar none the saddest day of my life. I tell people I've been to happier funerals. I was leaving all that I knew and loved and going with a man that I barely knew. And to what situation in his family, how many wives, I hadn't a clue. How many children, where they lived, I knew nothing. There was a horrible thunderstorm that day. And I remember sitting there in the car with my mother and my father and just praying, Lord, knock one of these trees over on us and kill us. I'd rather die. I'd rather die. I begged God to take me. Car accident. Lightning, please, from heaven strike me. I don't want to do this. I was 17 years old, and my husband was 50. He was older than my father. This is because of what society would do if they knew. The old men are sleeping with little girls, 14, 15, 16-year-old little girls, when they're old enough to be their father. They're people who would just go on the warpath. And so it's kept on the hush.
I was pursued from the time I was 14 by several of the colony men.
If you think this didn't go on during Brigham Young's time, I got news for you. They thought it was normal back then to have young brides. And so you can imagine.
And ended up marrying Verlin LeBaron, who was the prophet Joel's younger brother. And I became his sixth wife. He was 38, and I was a week past my 15th birthday.
Well, you take Mormon and put all the evidence before them, you can show that the leaders said it was essential to exaltation. And that's how they convinced people to switch over from the regular LDS church into the different polygamous groups.
The Kingstons believe and teach that the Mormon church is wrong. They've apostatized when they gave up the doctrine of polygamy.
There have been over 100 different breakoff groups of Mormonism.
Within all the different fundamentalist groups, well, there's the Peterson group, the Kingston group, the All-Red group, the Harmston group, the LeBaron group. There's a lot more of them out there than what they ever tell you in the paper, too.
So there are many.
Here we have the fruit of a false prophet. By their fruits ye shall know them. Here's the fruit.
Groups today that claim to be the true followers of Joseph Smith. It isn't just one church. There are many different churches that claim Joseph Smith as their head.
Well, the leader that I followed, his name was Ortel Kingston. And I just figured he was God's anointed. I just believed it. That's just all there was to it.
And our prophet was the only true prophet.
I'm going to link a video underneath who wrote 132. Obviously, you can check out my video about was Joseph Smith, did he practice polygamy or not? The source quotes, Hemlock Knott cites.
Prophet on the face of the earth.
Jim Harmston, he claimed to have been visited by 4 angels.
Joel LeBaron, who was the prophet.
Gordon B. Hinckley.
Warren Jeffs.
John Bright.
Gerald Peterson.
The Church of the Firstborn of the Fullness of Times.
The righteous branch of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
The true and living Church of Jesus Christ of Saints of the Last Days.
Our church was the only true church on the face of the earth.
We were taught that we were the true church.
The only ones that have the truth.
And one true church.
The only true church.
The only true church on the face of the earth.
To me, that's so amazing that the creator of the universe would say, okay, all the people in the world are going to go to hell except for this little group here.
Is it fear that holds women in polygamous marriages? For fear of being destroyed, like Joseph Smith said to Emma? For me it was. For me it was, because I had to strive to be an
Fear, compulsion, see Doctrine and Covenants 121.
elect lady. And that was the only way I was getting there, was to be submissive to my husband. And if I wasn't, and I didn't give him the wives that he wanted, I would be destroyed and would be damned. That's absolutely taught in the fundamentalist groups, absolutely.
When you're married in the principle, every day of your life is a competition for his resources. And every day you're having to do it better than somebody else.
You really didn't have a good, solid relationship with your husband because you knew that he wasn't just yours. You couldn't build this bond with him because if you did, you would be disappointed. He was gone. He was with other wives. There was the constant feeling of jealousy.
It's not a peaceful existence.
Behind the scenes, it's not Happyville. And there's horrible trouble between the sister wives.
There's a quote from Brigham Young's Journal of Discourses. This is him teaching the congregations. And as many times that he taught false teachings, because it's not doctrine, because we got to justify it, right? So it's okay, not doctrine. How did he see women he was treating like chattel? He set an example for the men in church for all time. This is what Brigham taught about the woman he and those evil men he was with were abusing. It's frequently happening that women say they are unhappy. Men will say, my wife, though a most excellent woman, has not seen a happy day since I took my second wife. And there's more quotes coming.
It is not a pleasant way to live. It's horrible. There's so much gaming that goes on between the women.
Lying in my bed when in the very room next door he's making love to another woman is abusive. It's emotional abuse. It's torture. It's torment for a woman. Women need to feel secure.
Verlin and I had been married for 4 months when I became aware that he was courting another girl who had been a childhood friend of mine. I couldn't believe that he was, after 4 months of being married to me, and during the time I'd seen him so little, really still didn't know him, to find that he was courting Lily I felt totally betrayed.
You've given a wife to your husband, and the first time that they go into her, it kills. I thought I was literally going to die. I was begging for death. I was just, could hardly breathe.
Second quote from Brigham Young. No, not a happy day for a year, says one, and another has not seen a happy day for 5 years. It is said that women are tied down and abused, that they are misused and have not the liberty they ought to have, that many of them are wading through a perfect flood of tears because of the conduct of some men, together with their own folly. So, of course, not just the men's fault. It's got to be the women's fault, too, together with their own folly. But I want to go somewhere and do something to get rid of the whiners. I do not want them to receive a part of the truth and spurn the rest out of doors. The hostility in that. This is a man of God, supposedly, Brigham Young. Journal of Discourses. Look it up. There it is, folks. Brutal.
To see him leave you and your arms and your home and know that he's going to another wife or more than one other wife is beyond difficult. It's heartbreaking.
And so those women with those big smiles on their faces have denied their true feelings. They've buried it, and they've put on a plastic facade. I'm not jealous of my sister wife. I love her. Oh, really? I just think you don't feel your feelings anymore. Denial was my drug of choice, too. For you feel like all those feelings and emotions that you have, you're taught that they are wicked and evil and that you need to repent. If you're having those bad feelings, you need to repent. And pretty soon all your feelings are buried. No matter.
Another quote from Brigham, but I do know that there is no cessation to the everlasting whining of many of the women in this territory. I am satisfied that this is the case, and if the woman will turn from the commandments of God and continue to despise the order of heaven, I will pray that the curse of the Almighty may be close to their heels, and that it may be following them all the day long. Brigham Young. Unbelievable.
What happened? I just kept plugging along, kept doing my duty. You never know for sure that you have a home in heaven. There's never a day that you know. It's always work, try, hope, pray. Every day of your life's a crapshoot, because you never know that you have heaven. You never know when you've done enough.
After all you can do.
To start to question polygamy. Number one was the loneliness that I felt, the loneliness that I saw in my husband's other wives. Plus I was angry at God, and I wanted him to explain to me why it was okay for his daughters to be lonely and without a husband, and yet how he could love his sons so much more than his daughters. I started studying the scriptures. And I decided that polygamy was my biggest issue. That's where I would start. I read in the Book of Mormon that God was very upset with them for living polygamy, called it an abomination in the sight of God, and said that they should have one wife, and concubines they should have.
Okay, Mormons will always bring up Jacob chapter 2, verse 30. And then they give a completely false interpretation that doesn't use any of the surrounding verses, that is completely out of context. Here we have an interpretation that uses all the verses in chapter 2 of Jacob in the Book of Mormon. Verse 30, for if I will, saith the Lord of hosts, raise up seed unto me, I will command my people, otherwise they shall hearken unto these things. And they always say, otherwise they shall hearken unto these things. It means that they can do polygamy. Somehow, I can't even see it anymore. Here, for if I will, saith the Lord, raise up seed unto me. Let's take that part of Jacob 2:30, okay? Jacob 2:25, here's the actual verses we can use to support that interpretation. Jacob 2:25, wherefore thus saith the Lord, I have led this people forth out of the land of Jerusalem by the power of mine arm, that I might raise up unto me a righteous branch from the fruit of the loins of Joseph. For if I will, saith the Lord of hosts, raise up seed unto me.
None. And I read this throughout so many of the different references in the Book of Mormon, and it confused me. You know, I started looking at the Bible and at the Doctrine and Covenants, and each one of these things said something different. The Doctrine and Covenants revelations that were...
This also goes with 1 Nephi chapter 7, verses 1 and 2. Lehi. This is to raise up righteous seed unto the Lord. Lehi, that he should take his family into the wilderness alone, but that his son should take daughters to wife, that they might raise up seed unto the Lord in the land of promise. So we have supporting verses of the very first part of Jacob chapter 2, verse 30. That's not even the full verse. This is the very first part of the verse. That they might raise up seed unto the Lord in the land of promise. Verse 2, and it came to pass that the Lord commanded him that I, Nephi, and my brethren should again return unto the land of Jerusalem.
Were given to Joseph Smith, commanded polygamy. And how God could change from saying it was an abomination in the Book of Mormon to commanding Joseph Smith's church to live it, saying that it was necessary. This just didn't make sense to me.
I will command my people. The second part of chapter 2 of Jacob, verse 30. I will command my people means, we can use verse 27, wherefore, my brethren, hear me and hearken to the word of the Lord, for there shall not any man among you have save it be one wife, and concubines he shall have none. And the last part of the verse, otherwise they shall hearken unto these things. What does that mean? Take verse 34, even has the same wording. And now, behold, my brethren, ye know that these commandments were given to our father Lehi, referring to chapter 2 again. Wherefore ye have known them before, and ye have come unto great condemnation, for ye have done these things, again, these things which ye ought not to have done. And then we're going to get the summary.
So I kept studying more and more about this and read in the Bible places where he said that a man and his wife should become one flesh. And why did God give Adam one wife? You know, he could have given him more at that point if he wanted us to live polygamy on the earth. And it just didn't, the whole thing just was totally confusing to me. From everything that I started to study, polygamy was absolutely...
Here's the summary. All the verses in Jacob chapter 2 and the whole Book of Mormon. Only the wicked in the Book of Mormon ever practiced polygamy. King Noah, Riplakish. Look it up if you like. Also support the verses. I just used my interpretation of verse 30. So here's the summary. So if God will raise up a righteous branch, he will command them to have one wife. If the Lord does not command his people, otherwise they shall hearken unto these things which they ought not to have done. Let's interpret scriptures in the context in which they were given, in the chapter at the very least, instead of having to go to a completely different book of scripture.
Not commanded by God in the Bible. And I remember times when I would try to talk to my husband about this. And one time in particular, I remember showing him in 1 Timothy. And I said to him, why is it that God says here that bishops should be the husbands of one wife? And he just laughed and kind of passed it off and said, well, that was back then. Since then, we've had the new and everlasting covenant revealed to Joseph Smith. And I said to my husband, how is it that it says here that a man that's a leader in the church needs to be able to manage his own family well? And I said, I don't think that you're managing your family well. And he says, in what way am I not managing my family well? And I said, well, you're never home for one thing. Not only that, but you have so many wives. We're all unhappy. We're all lonely. You're never a father for your children. They don't even know you. So I don't consider that good management of family.
Thanks for tuning in. We have discovered the fruit of a rotten tree that continues to pollute the world with the destruction of the souls of women and children. The sad result of a false prophet and his wicked teachings, not unlike the life of King Noah in the Book of Mormon. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great day.